Hi, welcome to Caterpillar Cross Stitch. My name is Ford, and last week I showed you how to mount your cross stitch project on a piece of foam core board so that you could put it in an off-the-shelf frame and save yourself some money on custom framing. This week I'm going to expand on that lesson a little bit and show you a way to display the project without the use of a frame. Now, this can be a very useful technique if the project that you have, for instance, doesn't fit the dimensions of a standard sized frame. You can display it without the frame and still not have to pay for custom framing, but get a beautiful custom display option that you can hang directly on your wall. It uses a lot of the same techniques, so let's get started. Now, before we begin, I'd get kicked off YouTube if I didn't beg you to like, subscribe, and comment. I know you're tired of hearing it, but honestly, it's how we get tracked as YouTubers, and it makes a big difference for us. It costs you nothing, so if you've ever learned anything from one of my videos, take 5 seconds right now and do those things for me. I would really appreciate it. The materials and tools that we're going to be using today are a nice, precise ruler, a Sharpie or other permanent marker for making marks on things. We will need some good quality scissors, like my embroidery scissors here. We will need a nice sharp cutting implement, like this craft knife that I have. If you have X-Acto knives or something like that, those will work really well as well. Enough ribbon in a decorative or complementary style that will match and enhance your project that we're going to run around the outside of it. A couple dozen ball head pins, ideally in colors that will complement or match your project. Some good quality archival acid-free tape. You can use cheaper tapes for this, but over time they will discolor and ruin your project, so I recommend spending a little bit of extra to make sure that you get artist tape or other tape that is complementary. I like this framer's tape because it doesn't stretch and it doesn't leave residue behind, and it is acid-free and archival. And then we are also going to want a framing hanger. And then finally we're going to need some more mat board, like the bit that we used last week. For this particular method, I like to have it be a little bit thicker. So either you can get a double thick piece of mat board, or you can cut 2 pieces of mat board in the size that you're going to display your project with. Most of these things, with the possible exception of the utility knife and the ribbon, are probably available at your local supermarket. But if not, your nearest craft store should have all of these things available. I find these often in the hardware aisle at my supermarket. So after we finished with our whole process of stretching and pinning and taping our project to the foam core board, this is what we wound up with last week. And this is actually already looking pretty good. But I want to give it a little bit more oomph. So there are a couple of things that I'm going to do a little bit differently compared to last week to make this piece a little bit more personal, customized, and decorative. So step 1 is I'm going to peel off these pieces of my framer's tape. And I'm going to open this up a little bit, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be preparing this to mount just on the wall on the foam core board. We're not going to use a frame at all. Now, we have a beautiful edge here from our pinning process, but I want to make it a little bit more powerful. I'm going to do what I call a gallery wrap or gallery display, which is a frameless, edgeless display. But I want it to be a little bit thicker so that it'll have a little bit more oomph. So there are 2 ways that you can do that. One is I bought 5mm foam core board. You can just buy 10mm foam core board. You might have to go to an art supply store instead of just going to your local supermarket for that, but it is available and would save you one of these steps. But what I'm going to do in this case, because I already have the 5mm foam core board, is I'm just going to cut another piece the same size, and I'm going to add it to the back of this, so I get a double thick foam core on there. Through the magic of editing, bada bing, it's all cut. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to nestle that in behind the one that's already there. And I'm going to give it a little bit of tape to hold it tight while I do the rest of my steps here. So you can see that that gives a much thicker, kind of more impressive edge to the piece here. So that's what I'm going for. Now the corners that I made when this were thinner are no longer going to be in the right spot, so I'll have to do this a little differently probably. All right, there we go. So just adding a little bit of thickness to the mount already makes this a lot more impressive. But because I didn't want to cut my corners, there's a little bit of slack in the corners here, and I kind of want to hide that. So I want to add a decorative element to this. And that's really easy to do thanks to the foam core. So I found this at the craft store. It was like $1.99 a yard. And I'm just going to add it to my piece around the edges. And I'm just going to pin it on, just like I did the rest of it. So all I'm going to do is, I'll start a little bit away. Where should I put my join? I'll put my join on the bottom. And instead of the little invisible pins that I used to mount it on the foam core, I'm going to use some ball head pins that are a little bit more visible and will add a decorative element instead of being just impossible to see. So I'm going to start a little bit beyond the center so that I can overlap my ribbon just a little bit. You can use any kind of decorative ribbon or lace or trim or anything that you might want for this. So I'm going to start by putting the pin at the starting point. And then I'm going to put a pin over here at the edge. And then I'm going to add a couple more pins in between. Now I'm choosing pins that match the color scheme of my project here. Let's get it back down close to the surface where you can see. And then because my ribbon here has a repeating pattern, which is very convenient, I can evenly space them by just counting the number of ruches in the fabric. So I'm just going to put a pin in every other ruche, and I'm going to stick with a pattern of colors. So I'm going to go black, red, white, yellow, oh, stabbed myself. And then black again. Now I've got all these ones holding it in place now, so I don't need the one that's at the corner anymore. It's the wrong color anyway. So I will replace that with a red one in the appropriate position on the ribbon. You can measure those out however you want. If yours doesn't have a repeating pattern that you can use a ruler or something like that. I'm just doing this because that's convenient. So again, I'm going to stretch my ribbon all the way along the edge that I'm about to do. And I'm going to put a temporary pin in place to hold it tight for me so that I don't have to keep holding it. And then I will just continue my pattern of decorative pins all the way around. While I'm doing that, you should go check out the Caterpillar Cross Stitch social media accounts. There's an amazing Facebook group with tens of thousands of stitchers, and there's an Instagram with tons and tons of followers, and there's just an amazing supportive and creative community that's grown up around the brand, and it's a very valuable thing to have in your life. To have supportive people who are into the same hobby and can commiserate when things go wrong and celebrate with you when you make something special. Highly worth checking those out. Also a good idea to sign up for the Stitch Club email newsletter. You'll get advance notice of any upcoming projects, stitch-alongs, retreats, and that kind of stuff that Caterpillar might be coming out with. Plus, as soon as you sign up, you'll get an ebook with like 10 free PDF cross-stitch patterns in it, including a cool year-long tracker pattern that you can use to track temperature or mood or habits or whatever. So hit the link down there in the description so you can get all that great stuff. Then now that I'm back to the start, I'm going to pull that first pin that I put in, and I'm going to use it to pin down both the start and the finish edges there. And I'm going to grab my embroidery scissors and trim off the edge of that. Okay, now just because of the way my particular ribbon works, I'm going to want to probably crease these edges a little bit so that it'll kind of lay a little more flat against the wall. Steamer or an iron or a hairdryer or something to warm it up a little bit will probably help a lot with that, and I will probably do that once I get home. But I've got that's just so cute. I'm very happy with how that looks right now. You can see my pins along the edges there. And then now I just need a way to hang it. So what I'm going to do in order to have a way to hang it is I'm going to use my framer's tape. And while I was at the craft store, I also bought myself some little framing hangers. Now this kind of needs to be pretty well centered, so I am going to measure this part. And what I'm going to do is my whole piece from edge to edge here is 176 millimeters, which is not surprising. I measured it to that size. So I'm going to make a mark at 88. That's the center horizontally of my piece. And I've got a bit of nonstick paper and a couple of pieces of my framer's tape. Get a piece of mat board here so I don't cut my table. Put my mounting hardware here, and I'll mark the point where it comes into contact with the surface. And I'll make a little line there. Then I'm going to use my craft knife to make a cut in the tape at that point. Now I can peel the tape up and put it on top of those little points where if I were putting this on a frame, I'd be driving a couple of little nails in there. But the foam core is not really strong enough for that, so this is why I'm doing it this way. So now I'm going to take my other piece of tape here, and I'm going to mirror those marks and those cuts. So I'm just going to stick this piece of tape to the other piece of tape. And then the little flap that I made, I'll stick that inside there. And stick that tape to itself again. So now I've got a little adhesive piece of framing hardware. Now for anything heavier this would not be sufficient, but this is a very lightweight way to finish a project, so I think it will do the trick. So there we have our custom display ready piece without having to use a frame, which can be particularly useful if you wind up with a project that doesn't fit into a standard sized frame. A lot of especially digital only designers don't think about frames when they set the sizes for their piece. So sometimes you wind up with things that are 3 times as wide as they are tall, or things that are just a little bit too big to fit into a standard frame. And you could spend hundreds of dollars on a custom frame, or you could use a technique like this to have a unique and personalized way to display the project without any of that nonsense. That about covers what I wanted to share with you this week, so I do want to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment if you found this useful. For Caterpillar Cross Stitch, my name is Ford, and I will see you next week.